You think you know the Johnstons. You have watched them on screen for years, inviting them into your living room, laughing with them, and believing in the picture-perfect image of a wholesome, tight-knit family that conquers the world together. To the world, Emma Johnston is the picture of innocence, the sweet, unblemished daughter who follows the rules and stays within the safe, comfortable lines drawn by her protective parents. But what if I told you that everything you think you know is just a facade? What if I told you that behind the closed doors of that famous household, a scandal of seismic proportions has been brewing, one that threatens to shatter the Johnston reputation forever? We are talking about a secret life, a forbidden love affair with an older businessman, and a web of lies so complex it could tear this family apart. The rumors are swirling, the whispers are getting louder, and the story we are about to unravel is not the one you will see on TLC. This is the story of a girl becoming a woman in the most dangerous way possible and a family on the brink of a total collapse. Before we dive deep into this explosive expose and uncover the insider reports that are shaking up the reality TV world, I need you to do one thing. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and hear the stories the networks are trying to bury, you need to hit that like button right now. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications for 7 Little People. We are the only ones brave enough to dig into the theories and the drama that happens when the cameras stop rolling. Do not miss out on the truth. Join our community now, and let's get into the scandal that everyone is afraid to talk about. Let's look closely at the reality. For years, the narrative has been controlled. Trent and Amber are the captains of the ship, and the kids are the crew, falling in line, dealing with life's hurdles with a smile. But anyone who understands human nature knows that you cannot keep a bird in a cage forever, no matter how gilded that cage might be. Emma has always been the quiet one, the observer, the one who seemed content with her lot in life. But sources suggest that beneath that calm exterior, a storm has been raging. We are looking at a young woman who is tired of the script, tired of the expectations, and desperate for a taste of the real world, the world that her parents have tried so hard to shield her from. This isn't just teenage rebellion. This is a fundamental shift in her identity. And usually, when a shift like this happens, there is a catalyst. In this case, the catalyst has a name, and that name is Matt. According to the exclusive theories circulating in the deepest corners of the fandom and insider circles, Matt is not your average boy next door. He isn't a high school crush or a college fling. Matt represents everything the Johnston household is not. He is described as an older, successful businessman, a man with a past, a man with ambition, and a man who operates in a world far removed from reality TV stardom. Imagine the allure for someone like Emma. Here's a man who doesn't see her as a reality star or a little person to be protected. He sees her as a woman. He treats her with an intellectual respect and a level of seriousness that she has likely never experienced before. The theory goes that this relationship didn't start in the spotlight. It couldn't. It started in the shadows, in the digital world, and transitioned into a clandestine romance that would make a thriller movie look tame. Think about the logistics of a secret like this. Living under the roof of Trent and Amber Johnston is like living in a fortress of surveillance. They are involved parents. They know where their kids are, who they are with, and what they are doing. For Emma to pull this off, she had to become a master of deception. We are talking about a double life. Emma at the dinner table, smiling and nodding, discussing school or family trips, was a mask. The real Emma was living for the stolen moments, the encrypted text messages, and the late-night meetups. Insiders speculate that Matt became her sanctuary. When the pressure of the cameras and the family brand became too much, he escaped. He offered her a vision of a future where she wasn't just one of the Johnstons, but an independent entity with her own agency. But a secret affair with an older man isn't just about romance. It is about power dynamics and the thrill of the forbidden. The sheer risk involved acts like an accelerant for the relationship. Every time they met, every time they avoided getting caught, the bond deepened. It became us against the world. For a young woman who has lived a sheltered life, that kind of intensity is intoxicating. It blinds you to the consequences. It makes you take risks you never thought possible. We are hearing reports of rented rooms, of business trips that were actually romantic getaways, of a sophisticated level of coordination that suggests Matt is a man who knows how to get what he wants, and Emma was more than willing to follow his lead. However, in a family as tight-knit as this one, the cracks eventually start to show. You cannot hide a burning fire in a paper bag. The first signs weren't explosive. They were subtle. It's the kind of thing that only family members notice at first. It's the way Emma started guarding her phone like it was the nuclear codes. It's the sudden need for privacy, the long walks alone, the vague explanations about where she was going. Siblings are usually the first to sniff out a rat. They know your patterns. They know when you are lying. Theories suggest that her siblings started noticing a change in her aura, a constant private smile, a distracted look in her eyes during family movie nights. She was physically present but emotionally miles away, living in the world she was building with Matt. Then comes the mother's intuition. Amber Johnston is not a woman you can easily fool. She has raised 5 children. She knows the difference between a bad mood and a deep secret. The reports indicate that Amber started sensing a shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't just behavior, it was energy. A mother knows when her daughter is in love, and she definitely knows when her daughter is hiding something. There is a specific kind of nervous energy that comes with living a lie. The extra care taken with appearance before running a simple errand, the defensiveness when asked simple questions. Amber began to watch, not with malice but with a growing sense of dread. She knows the world can be a predatory place, and her protective instincts must have been screaming that something was wrong. The danger wasn't just internal, though. The Johnstons are public figures. They live in a community. People talk. Neighbors have eyes. It is believed that the walls began to close in from the outside. Whispers started circulating in the local area. A car parked where it shouldn't be. A sighting of Emma with a man who clearly didn't fit the demographic of her usual friend group. Gossip is a slow poison, and in a town where everyone knows everyone, it travels fast. Imagine the tension in the household as these external rumors started to reach the ears of the family. The pressure cooker was being built. Trent, a man who prides himself on order and reputation, would have been on high alert. The family image is their livelihood, their brand. Any scandal, especially one involving an older man and a secret affair, is a direct threat to everything they have built. The narrative suggests that Emma was living on borrowed time. She must have known it. The stress of maintaining the lie, the guilt of deceiving the people she loved, and the terrifying thrill of the romance must have been tearing her apart. But she couldn't stop. Matt had become her world. He represented freedom. To give him up would be to admit defeat and return to the cage. So she dug in deeper. She became more careful, more secretive, which only made the inevitable collision more violent. The behavior became erratic. She was fighting a war on 2 fronts, protecting her heart and protecting her family from the truth. Finally, the moment came. It always does. You can only run for so long before the road runs out. The scene we are hearing about is one of high drama, taking place in the heart of the Johnston home, perhaps at the kitchen table, the site of so many family discussions. But this was no ordinary chat. Amber, unable to ignore the signs any longer, decided to confront the issue. But she didn't do it with anger. She did it with the one weapon Emma couldn't defend against: vulnerability. Instead of accusing her, she asked simply and softly if there was something she wasn't telling them. That question, asked in the quiet of the evening, pierced the armor. The weight of the secret was too heavy. The exhaustion of the double life finally broke her resolve. With tears in her eyes, the confession came tumbling out. She whispered his name. Matt. The truth was out in the open, hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. You can imagine the silence that followed. It wasn't just a revelation of a boyfriend. It was the revelation of a betrayal. It was the confirmation that their little girl had been living a completely different life right under their noses. The shock would have been physical. For Trent and Amber, this wasn't just about breaking a rule. It was about the shattering of trust. It was the realization that they didn't know their daughter as well as they thought they did. The storm had made landfall, but this confession was only the beginning. The revelation of the affair was just the tremor before the earthquake. The family was thrown into immediate chaos. Amber, feeling the sharp sting of betrayal, was likely consumed by fear. Fear that Emma was being manipulated, fear that this older man had taken advantage of her innocence. Trent's reaction would have been a mix of protective rage and pragmatic panic. Who is this guy? What does he want? How do we fix this before the media finds out? The house became a battlefield of emotions. The siblings, caught in the middle, were torn between loyalty to their sister and the shock of the news. The perfect family unit was fractured, divided by a secret that had grown too big to contain. The initial aftermath of the confession was a whirlwind of accusations and defenses. Emma, emboldened by her love for Matt, likely stood her ground for the first time in her life. She wasn't apologizing for loving him, she was apologizing for the secrecy. This distinction is crucial. It shows her evolution. She was no longer asking for permission. She was stating a fact. She loved him. He was part of her life. This defiance would have stunned her parents. They were used to compliance, used to being the ultimate authority. To see Emma stand firm against their judgment was a shock to the system. It signaled that the power dynamic had shifted permanently. As the days passed, the tension in the house would have been thick enough to cut with a knife. Every conversation was a minefield. The trust was gone. Trent demanded to meet this Matt, to size him up to see if he was a predator or a partner. Amber struggled to reconcile the daughter she raised with the woman who had kept such a massive part of her life hidden. The family was in crisis mode, trying to manage the fallout internally while keeping up appearances for the outside world. But the universe has a way of compounding challenges. Just when they thought they were dealing with the worst of it, just when they thought they could handle the scandal of the affair, another shoe was about to drop. A shoe so heavy it would threaten to crush the very foundation of the Johnston family. The story of the affair was significant, yes. It was scandalous. But it was manageable. Relationships can end. People can be paid off. Rumors can be squashed. But biology is undefeated. As the family argued and debated and cried over the secret romance, Emma was holding on to another piece of information. A secret so great it dwarfed the affair itself. She was carrying a burden that would change the trajectory of everyone's life involved. The sickness in the mornings, the fatigue, the changes in her body, she knew. And she knew that the confession of the boyfriend was just the appetizer. The main course was going to be a revelation that would test the limits of her parents' unconditional love. We are approaching the moment of the true turning point. The moment where this stops being a story about a rebellious daughter and starts being a story about life, death, and legacy. The family was still reeling, still processing the existence of Matt, when Emma gathered them again. This time, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't the nervous energy of the first confession. It was the heavy, solemn weight of a life-altering reality. She stood before the people who gave her life, trembling but determined, ready to drop the bomb that would incinerate the last remnants of her childhood innocence. The stage is set, the players are in position, the secret lover has been revealed, the trust has been broken, and the family is on edge. But they have no idea that the real storm is just about to hit. The conflict between tradition and independence is about to get physical, tangible, and irreversible. The whispered rumors and the insider reports all point to this specific moment as the climax of the first act of this tragedy. What Emma is about to say will divide the room, it will divide the fan base, and it will force every single member of the Johnston family to decide what they value more, their reputation or their blood. The secret is out, but the consequence is just beginning to breathe. We left off at the precipice of a revelation so monumental it makes a secret affair look like child's play. The Johnston family is already reeling. The truth about Emma's clandestine romance with an older man, Matt, is out. The trust is shattered, and the house is a war zone of fear and betrayal. But Emma holds a second, more powerful secret. As she gathers her parents in the living room, the air is thick with dread. This is not a confession born of guilt. It is a statement of unavoidable fact. Picture the scene. Trent and Amber, exhausted and worried, brace themselves for another argument. But what they get is a silence, a trembling breath, and then the 4 words that detonate their entire world. I'm pregnant. Let those words sink in. In the context of this family, a family built on an image of control, propriety, and a carefully managed timeline of life events, this is the nuclear option. The affair was a scandal they could potentially bury. A pregnancy is a biological fact that grows more undeniable every single day. The silence that followed Emma's words was, according to insider reports, suffocating. It was a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on the room, crushing the last remnants of the Johnston family's carefully crafted illusion. Amber's face, a mask of shock, crumpled. A gasp escaped her lips, the sound of a mother's heart breaking. Trent's expression, which had been a mixture of anger and concern, hardened into a cold, impenetrable wall of panic. The storm had just become a Category 5 hurricane. The silence finally shattered, and the room erupted. This was the ultimate confrontation, the point of no return. Amber's fear, her sense of betrayal, and her protective instinct all collided in a torrent of heartbroken words. "How could you let this happen?" she is said to have cried, her voice cracking. "Emma, you're so young. Do you even understand what this means?" For Amber, this wasn't just about the public shame. It was a primal fear for her daughter's future. The life she had envisioned for Emma, college, a respectable career, a marriage on their terms, had just evaporated. She saw her daughter, still a child in her eyes, being manipulated and trapped by a man she didn't trust, in a situation that was completely out of her control. Trent's pragmatism vanished, replaced by a desperate need to contain the impending disaster. His focus immediately shifted to the fallout, the reputation, the brand. "This isn't just about you," he reportedly stated, his voice low and intense. "This is about all of us. People will talk. The network, the sponsors. Have you thought about any of that?" This is the core conflict laid bare. A daughter's personal life versus the family's public enterprise. The argument escalated into a frenzy of fear and judgment. They saw a crisis to be managed, a scandal to be contained. But Emma saw a life to be lived. And this is the moment that defines her. This is the moment she ceased to be a child playing by their rules and became a woman setting her own. Pushed to her absolute limit, her voice shaking but filled with a conviction no one had ever heard from her before, she delivered the line that silenced the chaos. The line that ended the argument and began the long, painful process of rebuilding. She looked her parents in the eyes and said, "I don't need approval, I need support." That single sentence was a declaration of independence. It was a plea and a command all at once. It fundamentally reframed the entire situation. She wasn't asking for their permission to be pregnant. She wasn't asking for their blessing on her relationship. She was informing them of the reality and demanding that they step up, not as managers of the Johnston brand, but as her parents. The room fell silent once more, but this time it wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of a new, terrifying, and unavoidable reality sinking in. The fight was over. The family was left fractured, wounded, and staring down a future that no one had planned for. What happens after a bomb like that goes off? The family doesn't just go back to normal. The days that followed were reportedly a landscape of quiet tension and unspoken grief. They were forced to navigate a new world where secrets were replaced by a harsh and undeniable truth. The battleground shifted from preventing a crisis to dealing with its consequences. And this is where we start to see the first glimmers of change, the first fragile steps away from judgment and toward a difficult, messy acceptance. The storm of confrontation had to give way to the sobering reality of what came next. Amber's journey was perhaps the most profound. Her initial reaction was one of pure instinctual fear and heartbreak. But you cannot turn off a mother's love like a switch. Though she was still conflicted, still terrified, her maternal instincts began to take over. The insider narrative suggests that Amber was the first one to cross the chasm. She started slowly and painfully to re-engage with Emma not as a disobedient daughter, but as a young woman facing the biggest challenge of her life. She began guiding her through the practicalities. Doctor's appointments, nutrition, conversations about the physical and emotional toll of pregnancy. These were not easy conversations. They were likely filled with tension and tough lessons, but they were a bridge. Through these necessary actions, a new bond, one forged in crisis, began to form. Amber was wrestling with the fear that she was rewarding secrecy, but her love for her daughter was beginning to win the war against her fear of the scandal. Trent's path was different. He is a man of action, a protector who deals with threats by trying to control them. When he realized he couldn't control this, his entire approach had to change. His anxiety didn't disappear, it was channeled. He moved from trying to prevent the crisis to managing its outcome. We are hearing that Trent, in his pragmatic way, started focusing on the future. He began quietly researching financial options, looking into how to best support a new family unit. How could he ensure his daughter and his future grandchild were financially stable? This was his way of showing love. His protective nature was shifting from shielding her from her choices to helping her build a foundation to survive them. He was still the patriarch, but he was learning that true leadership sometimes means letting go of control and offering support instead. And then there's Matt, the catalyst, the older man at the center of the storm. Up until this point, he was a shadowy figure, a source of charm and rebellion. Now, he had to become something more. The pregnancy news forced him out of the shadows and into the harsh light of family scrutiny. He could no longer just be the exciting, secret lover. He had to prove he was a committed partner and a future father. The exclusive theories suggest that this was the ultimate test for him. Was he just a charming predator who would bolt at the first sign of real responsibility, as Amber and Trent feared? Or was he the real deal? According to our sources, Matt began to step up in a way that surprised everyone. He started accompanying Emma to her appointments. He was present. He was engaged. He began having concrete conversations about their future, about a home, about providing for a child. He was no longer just a symbol of defiance. He was starting to demonstrate a level of commitment that went beyond whispered promises in a rented room. He was facing the Johnston family's skepticism head-on, not with more charm, but with action. Each responsible step he took was a small chip in the wall of Trent and Amber's resistance. They were still wary, still hurt, but for the first time, they were seeing a man who wasn't running from the consequences. He was running towards them. This period was a fragile, painful process of adjustment for everyone. The family was living in a new reality, one defined by the impending arrival of a baby. The siblings were caught in a difficult position, trying to support Emma while also navigating their parents' grief and anxiety. The dynamics of the entire household had been rewritten. The old rules no longer applied. They were a family in transition, moving from a unit defined by tradition and a public image to one being reshaped by a crisis that demanded a new kind of unity. The path forward was still uncertain. Acceptance was not a destination they had reached, but a journey they were just beginning. The wounds were still fresh, the betrayal still stung, and the fear of public judgment was a constant shadow hanging over them. But in the midst of this wreckage, the first seeds of a new foundation were being planted. They were being forced to choose between the family they thought they were and the family they needed to become. And just as this fragile new dynamic began to take hold, another announcement was on the horizon. One that would once again test their limits and force them to decide, once and for all, whether they would stand together or fall apart. The crisis was not over. In fact, Emma and Matt were about to propose a solution that would be the biggest shock of all. The reckoning was just beginning. The Johnston family was living in the wreckage of their old life, a fragile truce hanging over a home still scarred by the revelation of Emma's pregnancy. They were just beginning to navigate this new, terrifying reality when Emma and Matt decided to drop another bombshell. If the pregnancy was a hurricane, this next announcement was the tsunami that followed. In the middle of a tense family dinner, a meal designed to feel normal but was anything but, Emma and Matt made their move. They announced their intention to marry. And they didn't just propose the idea. They set a date. January 18th, 2026. Imagine the whiplash. Trent and Amber had barely processed the fact that they were going to be grandparents. Now, they were being told a wedding was happening, and it was happening soon. The immediate reaction, as you would expect, was one of deep skepticism. To them, this looked like a panic move, a shotgun wedding, a desperate attempt to slap a band-aid of respectability on a gaping wound of scandal. This wasn't a marriage born of love and careful planning. In their eyes, it was a damage control operation. The questions must have flown. Why so soon? Are you sure about this? Is this what you really want, or is this about appearances? This was Matt's moment of truth. He was no longer just the mysterious older man. He was the potential son-in-law, the father of their grandchild, standing in the lion's den. And according to the insider narrative, this is where he finally showed his true colors. He didn't get defensive. He didn't get angry. He faced their skepticism with a calm, unwavering conviction that reportedly stunned the room. He looked Trent and Amber in the eye and laid it all on the line. "I love Emma," he is said to have declared, his voice steady. "I've loved her from the beginning. This isn't about appearances. This isn't about the baby or what people will say. This is about us. I want to stand beside her, raise our child together, and build a future that honors both of our families. Think about the weight of those words. He wasn't just talking about loving their daughter. He was talking about honoring their family. He was acknowledging their pain and their fear, while simultaneously refusing to back down from his commitment. This wasn't the slick charm of a manipulator. This was the raw declaration of a man who was all in. For the first time, Trent and Amber saw something beyond the red flags. They saw a glimpse of sincerity, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the disaster they thought it was. The wedding announcement, which began as another shock, became a tangible step toward building a new foundation. It gave everyone a mission. It shifted the energy from grieving the past to planning for the future. But this wasn't going to be a simple wedding. This was a strategic move on a public chessboard. Every decision, from the venue to the guest list, would be scrutinized. The family now had to perform the ultimate act of public relations, transforming a story of a scandalous teenage pregnancy into a heartwarming tale of true love and family unity. This is where the core conflict of love versus reputation came to a head. Could they have both? Could they support this unconventional love story while simultaneously protecting the Johnston brand? The weeks leading up to January 18th were an exercise in controlled chaos. Amber, channeling her anxiety into action, took a leading role in the planning. But it was a role filled with conflict. Every choice was a reminder of how different this was from the wedding she had always dreamed of for her daughter. And yet, through this process, she was forced to work alongside Emma and Matt, to see them operate as a team. She saw Matt defer to Emma's wishes. She saw him soothe her anxieties. She saw them laughing together over floral arrangements. She was witnessing the reality of their partnership, and it was slowly, painstakingly, eroding her fears. Trent, meanwhile, was doing his own work behind the scenes. He was vetting Matt's finances. He was having the hard conversations man to man about responsibility and long-term commitment. He was still the protector, but his definition of protection was evolving. It was no longer about keeping the world away from Emma. It was about ensuring the world she had chosen was a safe one. He was learning to trust his daughter's judgment, even if he couldn't fully understand her choices. This period was a crucible, forging a new, fragile respect between the patriarch and the man who had turned his world upside down. But the most profound transformation was happening within Amber. She was on a journey from judgment to acceptance, and it was leading her to a decision so radical, so generous, it would serve as the ultimate symbol of her unconditional love. She wrestled with her feelings for weeks. She felt betrayed by the secrecy, terrified for Emma's future, and resentful that her daughter's life had been pushed so far off the safe, respectable path. But beneath all of that was the unshakable love of a mother. She came to a powerful conclusion. Her daughter's stability was more important than her own disappointment. The fear of what people would say was nothing compared to the fear of her daughter struggling. She had to choose between punishing the secrecy and blessing the future. She chose the future. In a quiet, emotional moment just weeks before the wedding, Amber made her move. She sat Emma down and revealed a secret of her own. She was giving Emma and Matt a house. Not just any house, a house worth $1 million. Let that number sink in. This wasn't just a wedding gift. This was a statement. This was a life-changing act of acceptance. It was Amber's way of saying, I may not have chosen this path for you, but I will make sure it is paved with security. I will not let you fail. This was more than a financial transaction. It was a mother's blessing, a final, powerful surrender. It was her acknowledging that Emma was no longer a child to be controlled, but a woman building a family of her own, and that family deserved a home. This gift was the final piece of the puzzle, the act that solidified the family's new, united front. And then the day arrived, January 18th, 2026. The wedding day was not a somber affair, not a hushed ceremony to hide a scandal. It was a celebration. It was a declaration. When Emma walked down the aisle, she was not a girl hiding a secret. She was a radiant, confident woman claiming her destiny. She was pregnant, she was in love, and she was completely unapologetic. This was the culmination of her entire journey, from a compliant daughter living in the shadows to a fierce individual standing in the light of her own truth. As Amber watched her daughter approach the altar, the tears in her eyes were not tears of sorrow or regret. They were tears of pride. She saw the strength in Emma, the woman she had become through this crisis. She saw the genuine love in Matt's eyes as he watched his bride. In that moment, the fear and the judgment melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love for her family, this new, messy, unexpected, and resilient family. The wedding ceremony was the narrative's resolution, but the reception was the family's public statement. It was there, in front of friends, family, and a world that was undoubtedly watching and whispering, that Amber and Trent made the announcement. They publicly revealed the gift of the $1 million home. This was a masterstroke of reputation management, but it was also genuinely heartfelt. It sent a clear, undeniable message to everyone. It said, "We are not ashamed. We are proud. We are not fractured. We are united." This is not a crisis. This is a new beginning, and we are celebrating it with all the resources at our command. They took a story of potential scandal and, through the power of acceptance and a grand gesture, recast it as a testament to family resilience. What began as a story of a great and terrible secret, a story of forbidden love and the corrosive effect of lies, transformed into something else entirely. It became a story about the collision between tradition and independence, about the painful but necessary evolution of a family. It explored the brutal space between judgment and acceptance, forcing every character to confront what they truly valued. Was it their public image, or was it the authentic, complicated happiness of their own daughter? In the end, they chose love, they chose support, they chose family, not the perfect, curated version they sold to the world, but the real, flawed, and ultimately stronger version that was forged in the fire of this crisis. The Johnston family was redefined. Not by a TV network, not by public opinion, but by their own capacity to endure a storm and come out on the other side. Not just intact, but more deeply connected than ever before. The secret that threatened to destroy them ultimately became the catalyst for their rebirth, a testament to hard-won unity and the enduring power of hope. And that, right there, is the real story, the one that unfolds when the cameras are off and a family has to face the truth.